Good evening, all. Hope I'm audible and visible. Right? Let me know, just do a thumbs up or message, whatever. So, welcome all of you. Today's session will be very typical. Out of every 15 students who are writing mains, as you know, ultimately one of them succeed to the last stage. Around 13% of the people writing mains finally qualify the mains. And as you know, eventually half of them eventually get through the exam. Now, two things are very vital. One, the question to ponder is whether these people who are writing mains are, or is there a hierarchical or a classification between them regarding the level of knowledge or difference in the level of knowledge they have amongst themselves. One question, or first question. The second question is much more vital. If they have a similar level of knowledge and preparation, then what makes one different from the other? What sets one apart from the rest? So, if technically, right, 10 students are writing the general studies paper, then why only one is writing the way, or probably why only one is capable of writing the answer or scoring the marks which UPSC wants you to? So there are certain reasons for that. All of you go through rigorous process of mains preparation and you join or you do a lot of courses. We all do, we all have done. We have gone through the similar process and we all know that obviously 10, 15 years back, answer writing was not that emphasized, but still it was very vital. Probably the important thing there was more about knowing the content. Because we are writing two optionals and then general studies, an essay, and the usual papers. So it was obvious that content or information was more vital for us, and we did not pay much heed to answer writing. And in spite of that fact, many of the students in that era, 15 years back, also scored 350, 360, right? And yours obediently is also one of them. And I scored well. But did I go through so much of rigorous process of writing answer? No, I did not. Though I wrote notes, yes, a lot of notes were written by us, and that could be taken as a practice of answer writing. So this session is going to be useful for all those who feel that they have some lacuna on part of writing, or they have some lacuna in the part of interpretation of the question which comes. The process would be very simple, taking up a question from the PYQ, previous year question paper, especially of general studies paper 2 I am taking. As you see, the governance part, around 11 questions are there in the exam. And that part is little arbitrary. When I say arbitrary, it means that that part has two important components, philosophical components, factual and current perspective both. So a question is designed keeping two ideas in mind. One, the philosophical part, the ideological part, more, I would say, for PubAt students or for sociology students, pol science students who have studied these things, or a philosophy student, right? They are normative aspects, they are value-based aspects. The other part of the question is more factual and current. So generally they design the questions in such a manner that yes, a person seems to understand the question, but he does not seem to know exactly what to write. That is the biggest catch 22 in UP. Knowing but still don't know what to write. Fine. So we'll take up, not waste your time, we'll take up this simple question. I would say simple, yes, obviously for me it might be simple, not for the student, right? But let's keep it that way. Let's take it simple, call it simple, because eventually we are going to solve it. The doctrine of democratic governance, right? That's part of the mains 2024 paper, makes it necessary that the public perception of the integrity and commitment of the doctrine of democratic governance. The question, what is the Q point of the question? This is your something what we call as the Simple way. हर क्वेश्चन में, in every question you will find there is a cue, there is a reference, there is something to which or around which you will weave your answer. It's not the direct content, but it is the idea around which you will develop the answer. So this is the reference, the reference point, right? The question revolves around what? The context of democratic governance. First, understand the question. The doctrine, I know, obviously, that is not, don't have a lot of time in the exam, but at least as of now, when you want to practice it, when you want to know it, you want to understand it, you must at least decipher the question properly. The doctrine of democratic governance makes it necessary that the public perception of the integrity and commitment of civil servants becomes absolutely positive. Now, what is the question? The question is basically this, right? The public perception of the integrity and commitment of civil servants becomes absolutely positive, right? The question talks about how and what are the reasons and probably what are the drawbacks, what are the limitations as of now, that why public perception regarding public servants or civil servants is not positive. Why people have consciousness, why people are skeptical and apprehensive about a civil servant's integrity, honesty towards his work. Now that's the question. But why this particular issue, why this particular problem becomes more vital, it becomes more pronounced, it becomes more impactful, it becomes more inevitable, because somewhere the context in which this question is being raised is democratic governance, right? That is why the question says the doctrine of democratic governance. So the democratic governance as an idea is the context, is the entire framework under which you have to discuss or analyze this particular question. Question is this, not the democratic governance. So most of you might be fooled into understanding that I have to write only about democratic governance. No, you have to keep in mind the framework, the boundary of democratic governance, and then think of the issue which is asked in the question paper, right? So important, vital aspect is what? Do we need to search the context? Yes. Do we need to understand the importance of the context while reading the general studies papers or even reading your optional papers? Yes, context is essential. I might ask you about health governance in India or education in India, or for that matter, recently the global pandemic treaty which has been signed, right? The World Health Organization and World Health Assembly. Obviously, these are some vital events global which are going to impact your health governance nationally, regionally, and even locally. So every question that is being asked, if you say it is a current affairs question, if it is a current perspective question, then every question that is being asked has been asked in a context. Context does not mean only the reference. The context also means that has there been something so vital, has there been something which has happened, which has occurred, is so vital that my issue or the question that I have been asked in the examination, right, holds key to understanding that something or something which has happened is key to understanding or help me understanding and elaborating the question that has been asked. So पहले सबसे important है that you develop a or try to develop a practice. You try to develop an answer writing skill where you are able to interpret the question by what is the objective and what is the surrounding idea of this. This is the first lesson you should learn, not necessarily jump onto writing, oh, democratic governance ke kitne points hain. That's the secondary idea. And once you develop this as a habit, it is obvious that you are going to interpret every question in that manner. It's more about the mindset, more about the way you look at a question. It's not just about something, a rote learning or a template that you need to develop, but it is a mindset that you need to. Fine. So let us take this question and we'll try to frame an answer for this question. So the key aspect, let's, fine. So let's take this, right? So let me start with simple. Now, this is the question. Let me simplify it so that you can use it. Fine. The idea is not to make you Einstein in one day. You cannot become that. No need for that. The idea is only to make you understand how logically things have to be interpreted. So if the question, right, now make a keynote, make a mindset, make a framework or mental framework that what is the context, right? I would say what is the circumference, fine, what is the boundary? As simple as that. It's the first thing we need to find out. What is the context? What is the circumference? What is the boundary? The boundary is democratic. Once I know the boundary, once I know the framework, once I know the context, this will help me again in what? It will help me in building. This will be helping me in writing the introduction. And that is why it is vital. Because when you have to enhance or elaborate something, right, as a question, you will need to first start with the vital introduction. The vital introduction comes only when you understand what is the context in which you have been asked. So your introduction flows from understanding the circumference, boundary, or you can use the word. Fine. So your intro. So democratic governance is the boundary, fine, and how this boundary has been used to raise the issue. What is the issue? Now this is your core of the question. This is how you should break your question into very simple parts. What is the context? What has happened recently or something, what has taken recently, the event, then break the issue or identify the issue. What is the issue? The issue is regarding the civil servants, right? Civil servants. What about civil servants? Right? Technically, it is regarding their honesty, integrity, right, etc. Obviously, it is related to the performance, the values, the important virtues of civil services, right? And what is important about it? Virtues of civil servants, right? Regarding what? Regarding the negative public. So the question says it should be positive. Obviously, the issue is it positive? If it is not positive, then what it is? Or if it is negative, then why it is negative? Right? What makes this perception of people towards civil servants negative? It is a 10-mark question. We cannot write so much, but first we have to think. If we think fast, because when we start with the practice, then we start thinking faster. If we start thinking fast, then eventually we can write it. So you have now the context, you have now the issue, civil servants, honesty, integrity, virtues, right? Negative public perception, or the idea says that it should be absolutely positive, only then the democratic governance, this framework will work properly. Fine. Let's break the answer. So you have understood the context, you know the issue, fine. Why this issue has been raised? If you are a keen observer of civil services, or if you're a keen student of UPSC, obviously an aspirant who is reading newspapers properly, you know what has happened in the recent past. Fine. Several issues of corruption have come. Government has dismissed several, right, central civil servants, including some IAS and IPS as well, from the services. So dismissal. Various cases of misbehavior, various cases of undermining the authority, various cases of misuse of power and authority, visible not only at the lowest level but the highest. The corruption perception index, how it highlights the achievement. Where is India in corruption perception index? Fine. Now see, I'll tell you very interesting idea how to make your answer extraordinary. writing the same content, but from ordinary, make it extraordinary. Right? Now, because it is general studies, you have to keep a keen observation. As you know, India is a signatory to the Convention, United Nations Convention on Prevention of Corruption. 2005, India basically ratified it in 2011, right? So if you know that, now let's simplify it. Now the idea is clear. क्या लिखना है? So let's see how a probable answer. Now there are various formats, right? Let's say format 1. Format 1, if you have a 10 marker or 20 marker, you can multiply it in the same way. You have 10, 20, you won't get more than 20, or you can have 25 maximum. That's it. So if you have the format, you can multiply in the same manner. So if you have a 10 marker, let us say every answer requires an introduction. Fine, correct? A body, right, divided into certain parts. And I would use, as I use my methods, which got a lot of scores, whether in PubAd or sociology or general studies or essay, pre-conclusion and a fine or a way forward. It's a simple mental structure, right? Obviously, you need not write the headings in the exam. This will be logical. Don't write headings. These headings, right? So this is a mental mind map. So you have this format. Now we can move ahead. So one format is this, like I said, format 1, right? So let's say intro. How do we start an intro? Very interesting. Start the intro. People say, I will write about the definition of democratic governance. Yes, write it. Nobody is stopping you. Obviously, in answer, you have to write democratic governance. Without that, you cannot start. You cannot even analyze the idea, right? That what ails the civil services. But when you're starting this introduction, why don't you start this with a fact? Use of fact. Like I said, out of every 15 writing, 1 will qualify. Why 14 others will not qualify? That's the vital point. Out of 10 people from PubAd writing mains, right? And we know majority of these students. Writing mains, only 2 eventually will qualify for the interview. And out of the 2, technically 1, that is 10% is the success rate, will eventually qualify for final list. But why? That's the question. You can start, this is one very interesting format. Start the introduction with a fact. What is a fact? So if I say in the corruption perception index, right? India is perceived to be a corrupt country. It is going down on the corruption perception as per the Transparency International. So you can start with the idea, this idea, because question is about what? Question is about the performance, integrity, and honesty of the civil servants. Fine, right? Or you can start with this idea, corruption perception index, Transparency International. You know this agency is in Berlin, right? And likewise, so you can start with this one fact. Or let's make it more interesting. Fact. Another way of doing it. You are not the one who is speaking. You use a committee. You use a commission. You use some data or source of the government. So you can say, as per second ARC report on ethics in governance. As per second ARC report on ethics in governance, right? The conviction in corruption cases in India is as low as 8% or as low as 20% eventually in the long run. So second ARC is saying that only 20% of the public servants who are charged of corruption eventually are punished. Conviction rate is so low. Now, if we use this data or factual starting, right, what do? We build an argument. We start an argument. And this is one fundamental aspect of writing good answer. Start your introduction with a fact, with something which is not questionable, which cannot be debated. You start with that fact. and then build your argument. Now, obviously, once you start with this, then you initiate the argument. And this is right. So you're writing this fact, and then you initiate the argument that yes, this or the above fact or the given data indicates that the declining or there is a declining public perception in India regarding honesty and integrity in civil servants or public services. Right? You have started something with a factual argument, factual statement. From that, you build your argument and you say, yes, the declining trust or declining deficit, trust deficit. These are keywords. If it is a governance answer, there are some keywords which are necessary. If it is a society answer, there are some keywords which are necessary. If it is ethics answer, there are some keywords which are necessary, because the context can be duly understood only when you know the subject matter, the content of the subject. Fine. So it is obvious that when you are putting up a menu for a Mughlai dish or for a Chinese menu, right? You cannot put the Mughlai dish into the Chinese menu and the Chinese dish into Mughlai menu. Obviously, there is a specific framework in which something is used, something is conveyed, without which you will not understand it. Fine. So declining deficit of what? The people. So you now develop your argument. You develop your argument with some desirable statements. Some statements which are not facts. Fine. But they are, in ethics, they are called emotivism. They are some reflection of the reality, but not necessarily a verifiable fact. वो कोई fact नहीं है, data नहीं है, right? But वो एक desirable statements हैं, which are considered to be true. Honesty is the best policy. True, not a factual statement. So declining deficit, यहाँ से आप शुरू करो, fact लिखो, then you write some 2-3 lines which develop your argument further. So there is a declining deficit, trust deficit amongst. Fine. Now this argument has now started amongst citizens. This introduction, if you have to write 150 words, right? A simple general rule would be 20, 20 or kitna bacha? So 20% is introduction, 20% is conclusion. They should be given equal weightage, and 60% is the body, which can be divided into 2-3 parts. Fine. So you can think of the number of words as per this. So declining deficit, अब यहाँ से argument शुरू है. Now once you say there is a declining trust deficit in citizens, right, which is vital or which is a very important factor which determines, right, how well engaged people are in governance. This is the argument which brings the context of the question. So if there is a declining trust deficit, what does it mean? It undermines the citizens' involvement in democratic governance, क्योंकि उनको trust नहीं है. They don't trust. They are not very positive about the government. They are not very positive about the way government or the administration is functioning. So they ultimately, their engagement in the democratic process becomes less, or it slows down. And then you use this term democratic governance. Fine. Now you have the responsibility to explain. That's why I say governance or ethics or these areas, paper 2 power, these are some areas which have a lot of abstract terms, abstract ideas. These abstract ideas have to be simplified. So you can explain this democratic governance with, right, 4 to 5 keywords. That's it. Keywords. Don't write long sentences. That will waste your time and even your effort, and you will not get the benefit that you want. So explain with 4-5 keywords. Like if I say, what are these keywords? So when you think of democratic governance, what are the keywords? Right? Our constitutional philosophy. Right? Our constitution has already identified the form of political system. We, the people of India, having solemnly, right, So the Constitution emphasizes the sovereignty of right? The constitutional philosophy and thereby the political system that has come, parliamentary framework. So these are the key words and they will convey the idea. So we follow a parliamentary, we have a republican character. See, all of them are emphasizing democratic governance, right? How public perception, how public participation, how citizens' contribution is vital to the governance in our country. This is indicated by them. So parliamentary system, republic, right? Character, then electoral, process, and technically the right to vote. The presence of democratic institutions, electoral institutions like Election Commission of India, fine, and definitely these are the key words now in your introduction, which will consume 20-25 words, no doubt. Fine. So somewhere you are allowed to have 30 to 40 words in the introduction. If you write these keywords, your introduction is over. The argument which you started with the fact that you wrote, and then you focus on the keywords, the democratic governance necessarily involves these characteristics. Fine. So your intro or the initiation of the topic or the answer is complete now. Obviously, when you come to the second part, right, that is what you call the body or the substance, I would say. That is the core of the answer, right? So obviously, any body which you're writing 10 markers or 20 markers, the basic rule, simple rule is that 3, fine. It is 150 words around. If it is 300 words or 250 plus words, right? So you can have 3 headings and 5 to 6, that means 2 each you can have subheading. What does it mean? I'll tell you that also. So 3 headings, 5, 6 subheadings, fine, and then little bit of analysis, means one statement which helps the examiner understand that why this is the heading and why this is the subheading and what does it mean. So in general, if you have 20 markers, it will become 6, it will become 12. As simple. Analysis will always be there. So body will have technically 3 parts: headings, subheadings, and analysis. Analysis is not something that is to be done separately. Analysis is part of these two. This is analysis is part of that. Fine. So in every heading there is a subheading. The subheading would be analyzed, or 1 or 2 lines would be written. Subheading, analyzed, 1 or 2 points written. So every time you do it, you have to put this in body. So for example here, so if I take here, right, we are talking about civil servants and the issues. So if I just simply describe the body, fine, then you have the first heading. What is the first heading? Or the major headings. So always focus on major heading. What is the first major heading? Fine. बहुत लॉजिकल है. Role of civil or role of civil. So you can put it as 1 and then break this into 2 subheadings. 1A1. So role of civil services. What is the role of civil services? Right. Simplify. What is the role? एक तो one is constitutional, right, about what is the authority, what is the role, what is the function, what is the identity given to civil services in India. As you know, Part 14, Part 14A, Article 308 to 323 related to civil services, right? Constitution. Always, when you're writing an answer in paper 2, right? Definitely you have to bring constitutional position or judicial pronouncements in some form or the other. I'm not saying everywhere you have to write it, but some way you have to bring this idea. Constitutional position, fine, and the role in, right? Or you can simplify it because we have already used the word, you can simplify and say role in welfare, role in governance. So how, what they do in governance, what exactly is the nature of their role, fine, and this is how you should put the first heading and two. Then again, we go for the second heading. Once you have introduced the idea of civil services, what they do, what is their position, fine, then you have heading number 2. Now what could be the logical question? Says that yes, the people need to have trust, integrity, honesty, and all these things are necessary vital aspects of civil services, and probably it is declining, right? So second heading would deal with this idea. One, what is the role, what they should do, what exactly they are supposed to do. Then second heading, fine. And what is the second heading? The problems or issues with civil. Now here you can develop more subheadings if you want. If you have good content, write it. So what are the problems? Let's say 2A. 2A talks about what are the problems, right? So you can write with politicization. The most important one in the beginning. Fine. B. What is the problem? Lack of reforms. Elaborate a bit. C. Corruption. Fine. D. Accountability and other. Analyze them. Give examples. Fine. Use examples. Use current. If you want data, if you want facts, use them here in two lines, two lines. Because only the vital issues must be highlighted. It's just a 10 mark. Fine. Then we go to the third heading. What will be the third heading now? The remedies, forms. So this is third. Now in this A you can write. What is the change now? The remedies and reforms क्यों होने चाहिए? क्यों? Because see, you are having now emerging citizen consciousness. One of the factors that need the reforms and remedies, citizens consciousness, enactment of Panchayati Raj Act, decentralization of power, local governance. Fine. Focus on institute. Obviously, you cannot control lack of honesty or integrity merely by talking about, right, reforms. If you don't emphasize what these reforms must look like. So these reforms can look like the reforms in institution. You can have Lokpal, you can bring reforms to CBI, you can bring reforms to anti-corruption laws, and so institutional and legal setup must change. See, reforms at what? At the level of community, or this is the most vital aspect today, third party. Third party actors, how NGOs, media, and whatever is changing today, how they can bring the remedy. Now, once you have summarized these ideas, right, the next aspect is to close down these arguments. So if you want to close them down with the futuristic reference or the instant changes which government has brought, like Karm Yogi mission or transparency laws or judicial activism which is increasing and ensuring that public interest is protected, and likewise. So you can now summarize. Don't summarize what you have written here. Fine. You need to close the argument. So you need to close the argument on a positive aspect that yes, in a democratic governance, the citizens' trust and the citizens' confidence can be restored in the public services. That is a very vital aspect of the democracy to function and flourish. But how it can be done, or what should be the future course of action which should be taken, or you can also use a quotation as vital and say, okay, fine, bureaucracy is the price of parliamentary democracy. There are a lot of quotations which fine. The ultimately the governing and the governed, right, need to have a mutual trust. If it doesn't happen, whatever changes you bring, it is useless. Look at the perception, right? There are a lot of industrial states or economically prosperous states in India, but they do not have less crime, they have higher crime. There are a lot of literate states in India, but still crime is very high. Corruption is very high. So you can bring some interesting anecdotes. Anecdotes, you understand, like a story, but not to be totally fictional story. It has to derive somewhere from the real world examples, right? So you can bring anecdotes, you can bring examples, you can bring quotations, you can also bring suggestions and reforms. You can bring some global case studies like first you say Singapore, Brazil, right? Many other countries in the world have, even African countries have taken a lot of good initiatives through which they have tried to reinforce the civil servants' moral and professional responsibility towards citizens. Fine. So you can close this argument. Right. Again, the conclusion can be like two types. The one type is closed, one type is open. Fine. And there can be a mix also of this, right? Neither too close nor too ended. So we say, okay, we can take balanced. So how we take a balanced view, right? We re-emphasize the problem, then we suggest some remedies, and we indicate, yes, that there is a hope, there is an optimistic future that we are looking into, right? India is going to be, or India has going to become one of the fastest growing economies in the world, is aspiring to be number 2 or number 1, and India is technically also, evolving in that sense. Or in that scenario, there's a need for a global civil services, not just a national civil services, right? So you can bring such perspectives have two important things, two values. One is the surprise value for the examiner, right? He might not be anticipating, he might be anticipating कि boring ending होगी, right? तो थोड़ा change होगा, right? Secondly, he also understands that this person not only has analytical mind, he does not have only information, but he can also have a decision making or a decision or predicting, right? Good decisions that are to be taken in. So your decision making ability, right, your assessment of the problem and the issue, and suggestive nature, the suggestive nature of conclusion can be developed. Now this is a detailed exercise I did. Why we did that? Because this is what you need to think when you write an answer for general studies in mains, and even for many other subjects or essays too. Fine. So there are different other formats. We'll take up another question one day, right, within this week. Another question which is 20 marker or 15 marker, and that involves certain factual. Because this question was more open-ended already, it was more abstract in nature, it was more philosophical in nature, or it has both the parts. Like I said, you always have an ideology part, right? You always have an ideology part, you always have a current or factual perspective part. Both parts are there in the answer, both have to be fine. So this is how we can write, this is how we can improve, and this is not a one shot process, it's a continuous process. If you do it, keep doing it slowly, definitely you are going to evolve, right? Even 2 months or 3 months is not a small time, obviously, if you have studied properly. So when you say I'm short of facts, acquire the facts, fine. But the moment you say I'm short of ideas, then it becomes a big resistance to you qualifying the mains. So you might have less of facts, but you can have more of ideas. Put those facts into the correct ideas, you will score. Fine. So thank you so much for listening to me. and keep watching. And in future, we are going to talk about a lot of other, we'll take up other examples and we'll do it. Fine. The proof of pudding is in the eating. If you know the phrase, think about it, right? You simply cannot talk about things you do not have actually the experience of those. So if you are actually willing to score more, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to think beyond the book. And people say between the lines. Yes, between the lines, but I would say not just between the lines, between the words. You have to be more evolved. And it is a very simple process, nothing tough about it. Fine, but it is going to transform you the way you think about things in any across any of the papers that you write, including your essay paper. Fine, we'll talk about that also. Thank you so much for listening. See you again sometime. Fine, keep watching ProdEgy IS, keep watching good videos, quality content, and keep writing to us if you want something more in terms of clarification or analysis. See you then. Thank you so much. All the best.